Right now, across the United States, entire city blocks sit empty. Homes with curtains still in the windows, driveways cracked, lawns swallowed by weeds. And nobody coming back. We're not talking about abandoned mining towns from the 1800s. These are modern American cities, places with hospitals, school districts, city councils, and zip codes that still show up on Amazon's delivery map. But the people, they're vanishing. In some of these cities, the population has dropped by 30, 40, even 60% from its peak. And the pace isn't slowing, it's accelerating. What I'm about to walk you through are 10 real US cities that are rapidly turning into ghost towns. And the reasons behind each one should genuinely concern you, no matter where you live. Because the forces hollowing out these places aren't unique to them. They're patterns, and patterns spread. So what actually causes a modern city to collapse? It's never just one thing. It's a layered failure. Jobs leave first, then young people follow, then tax revenue drops, then services get cut, then crime ticks up, then more people leave, and the cycle tightens like a knot. The cities on this list didn't fall overnight, they decayed. And in most cases, the warning signs were visible for years before anyone in power acknowledged them. That's the part that should keep you paying attention. Gary, Indiana. If there's a poster child for American urban collapse, this is it. In 1960, Gary had nearly 180,000 residents and one of the strongest middle-class economies in the Midwest, driven almost entirely by U.S. steel. The jobs paid well. Families built lives. And then, decade by decade, the steel industry contracted. Automation replaced workers. Plants closed or relocated. By 2020, Gary's population had dropped to roughly 69,000, less than half of what it was. Drive through certain neighborhoods today, and you'll see block after block of abandoned homes. Entire commercial strips with nothing open. The city has tried demolition programs, land banks, revival grants. Some of it helps at the margins. But when an entire economy is built on one industry, and that industry disappears, no grant program fills the crater. If you live in a city that depends heavily on a single employer or sector, Gary is a warning you shouldn't ignore. Cairo, Illinois. And if you're wondering, locals pronounce it Cairo. This small city sits right where the Ohio and Mississippi rivers meet, which historically made it a vital trading hub. During the Civil War, it was a strategic military post. By the mid-20th century, it was a functioning community with shops, schools, and neighborhoods full of families. Then came racial tension, economic disinvestment, white flight, and flooding. Over and over again. The population peaked around 15,000 in the 1920s. Today, it's under 1,900. That's not a typo. Cairo lost nearly 90% of its people. Most of the public housing has been demolished. The downtown is largely boarded up. Walking through Cairo today feels like walking through a place the country simply forgot. And in many ways, it did. Youngstown, Ohio used to be steel country, much like Gary. At its height in the 1950s, the population was around 170,000. When the steel mills closed, and they closed fast during the late 70s in what locals still call Black Monday, the fallout was devastating. Tens of thousands of jobs gone in a matter of years. Today, Youngstown's population sits near 60,000, and the city has more vacant lots than most people can process. Here's what makes Youngstown particularly haunting. The city actually developed a plan called Youngstown 2010, which accepted the reality of shrinkage and tried to plan around it. They stopped pretending growth was coming back and focused on managing decline responsibly. It was controversial, but honest, and that honesty is rare. Most cities on this list are still pretending the comeback is right around the corner. St. Louis, Missouri is tricky because the metro area is still sizable, but the city proper has been bleeding residents for decades. In 1950, St. Louis had over 850,000 people within city limits. The most recent numbers put it around 283,000. That's a loss of more than 500,000 people. Part of this is structural. St. Louis City and St. Louis County operate as separate entities, so suburban growth doesn't register as city growth. But the result is the same. Entire swaths of North St. Louis are depopulated, homes collapsing in on themselves. Violent crime rates that consistently rank among the worst nationally. The tax base keeps shrinking while the infrastructure keeps aging, and that math doesn't work for long. People who love St. Louis will point to pockets of revitalization, and those pockets are real. But they're surrounded by miles of decline that no brewery district or loft conversion can offset alone. Hartford, Connecticut surprises people. It's a state capital. It's in one of the wealthiest states in the country. And yet, Hartford has been in financial crisis mode for years. Insurance companies, once the backbone of the local economy, have downsized, automated, or relocated operations. The city has wrestled with potential bankruptcy. Poverty rates are high, school funding is a constant battle, and the population has steadily declined from its mid-century peak. Hartford proves something uncomfortable. Proximity to wealth doesn't protect you from decline. Some of the poorest cities in America exist just minutes away from some of the richest suburbs. That gap isn't closing, it's widening. Baltimore, Maryland. You've probably heard about Baltimore's struggles, crime, the opioid crisis, political corruption, but the population numbers tell a story that goes beyond headlines. Baltimore peaked at nearly 1 million residents in 1950. Today, it's around 570,000. The city has more than 15,000 vacant properties. Entire rows of once beautiful brick row homes sitting hollow. Some neighborhoods have lost so many people that the city has discussed decommissioning streets. Actually removing roads because there's no one left to drive on them. Baltimore isn't a small, forgotten town. It's a major East Coast city, and it's still losing people every single year. The folks who remain are often the ones who can't afford to leave, which creates its own cycle of concentrated poverty and declining services. Pine Bluff, Arkansas probably isn't on your radar, and that's exactly why it belongs on this list. This city in southeastern Arkansas has lost over 40% of its population since 1980. Manufacturing left. Agriculture mechanized. Young people moved to Little Rock or out of state entirely. What's left is a community struggling with high poverty, high crime relative to its size, and shrinking opportunity. Pine Bluff still has people who care deeply about it. Community, leaders, small business owners, church groups trying to hold things together. But caring isn't the same as having the resources to reverse decades of economic erosion. And when a city this small loses population at this rate, every single departure is felt. A closed business isn't just a closed business, it might be the only one in that part of town. Jackson, Mississippi made national news when the water system essentially failed. Residents went weeks without safe drinking water. But here's what a lot of the coverage missed. Jackson's population has been declining for decades, from nearly 200,000 in 1980 to around 150,000 today. And the people leaving tend to be those with means, which shrinks the tax base, which degrades infrastructure, which drives more people out. The water crisis wasn't a freak accident. It was the predictable result of a city losing the financial capacity to maintain basic systems. When a government can't guarantee clean water, trust collapses. And once trust is gone, convincing people to stay or to invest becomes nearly impossible. Jackson is a case study in what happens when decline isn't just economic. It becomes structural, physical. It comes out of your faucet. Flint, Michigan will forever be associated with the water crisis that began in 2014, when the city switched its water source and lead leached into the supply. Children were poisoned. Trust in local and state government was shattered. But Flint's problems didn't start with the water. The city peaked at nearly 200,000 people in the 1960s, fueled by General Motors. As GM pulled out, Flint hollowed. By the time the water crisis hit, the population was already below 100,000 and falling. Today, it's near 87,000. The water situation has improved significantly, but the scars run deep. Families who stayed dealt with years of uncertainty, property values that cratered, and a national reputation that became a punchline. Flint's story isn't just about water. It's about what happens when a community loses its economic anchor and then gets hit again while it's already down. Detroit. You expected this one, and I almost didn't include it because the story has been told so many times. But here's why it still matters. Detroit went from 1.85 million residents in 1950 to under 640,000 today. That's a loss of over 1.2 million people from a single American city. Let that sink in. Now, Detroit is more complicated than the other cities on this list because real reinvestment is happening in certain areas. Downtown and Midtown have seen genuine energy. New businesses, renovated buildings, young professionals moving in. But drive 15 minutes outside of that core, and you'll find neighborhoods where nature is literally reclaiming entire blocks. Deer walking through abandoned houses, trees growing through rooftops. The two Detroits that exist side by side are almost hard to believe unless you've seen it yourself. The revitalization is real, but it's concentrated. And for the vast majority of the city's geography, decline is still the dominant reality. So here's the pattern, and this is the part I really want you to sit with. Every city on this list followed a version of the same script. Economic dependence on one or two industries. Loss of that industry through automation, globalization, or corporate decisions made hundreds of miles away. Population decline, first slow, then rapid. Tax base erosion, service cuts, infrastructure decay, crime increases, more people leave, and the cycle feeds itself. This isn't ancient history. This is happening right now, in real time, in American cities with traffic lights and public libraries and little league teams. And here's the part nobody talks about enough. The early stages of this cycle look completely normal. Your neighbor moves for a better job. A store closes and you assume another will open. The school combines two classes because enrollment dipped slightly. These feel like small, unconnected events, but strung together across 5 or 10 years, they are exactly how a city begins to empty. I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I'm telling you because awareness is the first step toward making better decisions about where you live, where you invest, where you plant roots. Look at your own city's population trends over the last 20 years. Look at employer diversification. Look at infrastructure spending. These aren't abstract data points. They're the vital signs of your community. If this opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, share it with someone in your household. These conversations matter more than most people realize. And if you want to stay informed on shifts like these, the kind of slow-moving changes that don't make breaking news until it's too late, hit subscribe. I cover this stuff every week because somebody has to, and I'd rather you hear it with context than stumble into it unprepared. Drop a comment and tell me, does your city show any of these warning signs? I read every single one, and some of the best insights come from people living it firsthand.